This episode of The Benefit Whisperer is brought to you by Route 3 Insurance and Financial Services, where smarter benefits begin. If you're tired of rising healthcare costs and opaque insurance contracts, Route 3 is here to help you take control. They specialize in transparent, employer-driven benefit strategies that protect your people and your bottom line. Ready to break away from the status quo? Visit www.fixmybenefitsnow.com and discover how Route 3 can help you build a plan that actually works for your team and for your budget. Welcome back to another episode of The Benefit Whisperer, the show where we pull back the curtain on what's really driving your healthcare costs and what you can do to stop feeding a system that's rigged against you. Returning once again is Chris Deacon, former director of health benefits for the state of New Jersey, which is a group with 820,000 approximately people on it. So pretty substantial. And the author of the new book, the amazing new book, which is a must read, called The Great American Healthcare Heist. And it's more than just a catchy title. It's really for every employer, taxpayer, and plan sponsor that is footing the bill while others profit in the shadows. So Chris has seen from the inside the workings of, let's call it how the sausage is made. And spoiler, it's not a grass-fed sausage. So thanks again for joining us one more time. And let's just dive in where we left off. So, you told us in the last episode a lot about, the $2 billion that you saved the state of New Jersey over 5 years just on their PBM spending. You talked about the hundreds of millions you saved in addition on the medical spending. And for those that haven't listened to that episode, you should jump back and listen to that, which was episode number 27, because there's a lot of information on there. So let's start with, a question that I asked you in the last episode, which is about, mid-sized employer. If you are a mid-sized employer and you've got a self-funded plan already, what kind of traps might you be falling into without even realizing it?
Yeah. And I think we touched on this last time, but I think it's important to reiterate that you don't know the traps that you're falling into if you do not have the right advisor, consultant in place to guide you through that process. And whether that's a RFP processes or point solution review, you really need that individual to help you see where those blind spots are. But generally speaking, your blind spots are going to be in your TPA contract and your PBM contract and understanding how you might be hurting as a result. So as an example, recovery services. Right? If you go to likely an exhibit or a part of the appendix in your TPA agreement, you're going to see that you've agreed to have your TPA engage in recovery services on your behalf, which essentially means that once, if they let a claim be paid in error, for example, a duplicate, or they've overpaid a claim, if they're going to recover that money back for you, they're going to take a cool 30%. Right? Yeah, a lot of what we talk about in terms of waste and how could this be happening, you would be shocked at the retort from most of the TPAs is, yeah, but you signed the contract. It's right there, right? And usually it is. You just have to understand what they're actually saying. So, yeah.
Exactly. Years ago, Chris, I spoke to an employer in the state of Tennessee market. I'm in Texas now, but at that time I was living in Tennessee, and I think they had about 800 employees total. I looked at their administrative services agreement with the big insurance company. They were self-funded, and it had that recovery language, in it. But what it said, and I'm just going by memory, it said, you as the employer have no right to ask the providers what they charged or what they were paid for any given services. And if you want to know that, you can only do it through us. So basically, we're spending your money, but you can't ask how we spent it and how much we paid. It was crazy. And when I found that, I said, look, did you realize this was in there? And do you know what it means? And they didn't know.
No. And I laugh, kind of giggle to myself because I was just dealing with this issue. So, these terms are still in contracts today. And one of the in this case, one of the conditions for an employer actually getting access to their claims data was that they again agreed that they could not contact any providers. And, I have a quick anecdote. We had a high cost claim in New Jersey. It was a $2 million claim from New York Presbyterian. And I was looking through our claims data and I saw that the charged amount was only $678,000, but we paid 2.1 million. And I thought to myself, something doesn't sound right here. And so
Okay.
I wanted to see what happened to the middle part. Our vendor at the time said, no, 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 don't worry. You actually paid the $2.1 million. We're not keeping anything in the middle. That was their negotiated rate. They just didn't bill correctly. That's why that showed up. But I wasn't quite
Oh,
convinced. So
no.
I
Mhm.
decided that we would call New York Presbyterian to see what we had the claim number, we had the Root Association trace number.
Mhm.
We knew they could trace that financial detail, and they refused to talk to us because not only are you precluded as an employer from speaking to them,
Mhm.
but they are absolutely prohibited in
Wow.
their contracts from speaking to you.
Gag clause.
Yep.
Wow. Yeah. No, that's, the language I spoke about with this employer, picture this. Let's say a small employer, you've got 100 employees and you're looking for a payroll system. And I say, "Hey, I've got a great deal for you. I'm gonna charge you $100 a month, dollar per employee per month, and I'm gonna do all your payroll." But the terms are, okay, you can't ask your employee how much I'm paying them per hour or how many hours they work. I'm gonna decide that. Okay?
Right.
And, you have no right to audit if I paid them all they put in for. Everybody would shake their head and say, "Are you crazy?" But that's
Right.
what we're doing in healthcare, Chris. I mean, it's crazy that in this day and age that is still happening.
Right.
Wow.
No, it is crazy. I just did a one pager put
Mhm.
together for a staff at the Department of Labor to really lay out, and put actual contract terms that employers are being forced to sign that
Mhm.
say these things, that you can't talk to providers, that your financial transaction information is proprietary to the vendor. And, these terms that I think Congress intended to do away with the CAA, but they're absolutely
Yeah.
still rampant. I don't think that the CAA has done much, if anything, to solve for them except drive them further underground.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The CA, the Consolidated Appropriations Act, most legislation has good intent, but in practice, it usually is never done, the way it was intended to. So, it's a feel good thing. Oh, this is great. We're going to have more transparency, but do we? Or as you say, do they retreat further into the shadows? So wow. So 678 wait,
Thousand.
678,000 was billed, but they paid 2.1 million?
Correct. So
Or
it
they
was
co
an
wow. Okay.
yeah, it was an out of state Blue Cross Blue Shield
Oh,
claim, which
okay.
if you're familiar with the Blue Card system, once you
Yes.
start using a Blue network that is not your own,
Mhm.
a host
Right.
network,
Mhm.
you are subject to their terms and conditions with their providers.
Oh,
Though you
okay.
are not, you're not privy to them, you are just subject
Mhm.
to them. And once claims are paid, they are paid. It's
Mhm.
a final adjudication. It cannot be revisited retrospectively. Um, for example, if you made, twice the payment it should have been, maybe a fat fingers mistake, who knows? Once that payment is made via the Blue Card system, that is a final adjudication, and you can only get it back through cross plan set offs and all the rest of it,
Yeah.
meaning
Yeah,
you're
I was
not
gonna
probably going to get it back.
Yeah, I was gonna talk about cross-plan offsetting. We've seen that, happen, before, and I'm sure it happens all the time, and that's another thing people probably don't know. Okay, now, sometimes when I go to a restaurant and I pay $100 for a meal, I'll actually pay 120, $20 tip or 78 to 2.1. That's more than just a tip. And to this day, I shouldn't say nobody. You don't really know what really was paid. Wow.
No,
Okay.
no.
So, Chris, what role do brokers and TPAs and even PBMs have in perpetuating this system, either knowingly or unknowingly?
I mean, their role is central, right? Until the
Mhm.
business model changes, I don't see an incentive for them to change the way they do business. For the most part, and I don't want to generalize and put everybody into this category because there are good actors, but for
Mhm.
the most part, it feels like they're just going to ride this train for as long as they can because it's working for them, and why change? I see TPAs, the bigger carriers, the BUCAs, buckling down on not giving access to claims data or restricting its use when they are giving it, restricting audit rights. I see those buckling down. I don't see
Mhm.
opening up at all.
Yeah. No, I sadly, I'm seeing the same thing, and it's not good for the consumer. It's not good for, well, it's good for some people, but, not for most.
Right.
We're spending way too much.
I
Um
would say in the broker and consultant community, while there's still part of that system that exists, I do see more of a willingness to change. The question is,
Right,
how do you change in that environment and still remain financially viable? Now, I'm not saying we're there, but I am saying
right.
I would say that industry in particular, again, not everyone, but I see the most hope in more immediate change from them.
Wow. And a lot of employers are thinking, whether it's their TPA/insurance carrier or whether it's their consulting firm, they think big is better. This is a
Yeah.
huge insurance company. This is a huge brokerage. So we're big. So we need to go with big without having a truly independent consultant review the contract terms and all that other stuff. So not
Right.
necessarily the best thing.
And I think we intuitively know that healthcare is local, right? Like, I don't
Mhm.
get my healthcare from a provider in California when I'm a resident of New Jersey. It is a local thing. And so, if you're an employer with a heavy regional concentration, in a particular area, anything you can do to put yourself as the employer, like you did, closer
Mhm.
into from a transaction perspective to the actual provider and removing the middlemen and the layers in between that transaction, the better. So it's not a one size fits all. It's not a brand name is best. It's not a who has the biggest status network. Who has the best providers that I need in my community for my members.
Right.
Those are the questions that we really need to be asking.
Yes, great questions. So, Chris, are there any red flags that scream you're being played that an employer plan sponsor should look out for or could find?
Yeah, I mean, I think flag number one is an unwillingness to share data, right? When
Mhm,
you are asking for in depth, whether it's raw claims data on the PBM side or the TPA side, if there's an unwillingness to share that information, there's a reason there's an unwillingness to share that information. And it's likely because something is being hidden. And all the lawsuits that I'm sure Julie Selesnik spoke about, like the mass laborers case and some of the others
mhm,
that are floating out there. In each case, where the employer first had to fight for years to get their data, and then when they got it or got some of it, they inevitably found something, right, that led to the
sure.
lawsuit and the allegations of
Mhm,
breach. So
right.
where there's smoke, there's fire. Where they're trying to like hide the smoke, there's definitely fire. So those are the red flags I would definitely look out for
Mhm,
sure.
thank you. So, you talk a lot about fiduciary duty in your book. How badly is that principle being ignored in today's benefit plans? We touched on it in the last episode. Let's go a little bit further on that.
Yeah, fiduciary duty, the F word, if you will, has been used very differently in the last 3 years than it was maybe like say 5 years ago. The fiduciary principles, right? Like what you need to do as a fiduciary, they have not changed. We've tried to help employers implement them with the CAA. But at the end of the day, it's about making really smart, prudent decisions on behalf of your plan as the administrator. Unfortunately, what I think is happening in the market, or at least what I've seen, is the term is getting thrown around as a marketing technique in many
Right.
ways. Um, offering to check a fiduciary box, form a committee, do these three things, check your fiduciary box. And that's not how it works, right? It's hard work. It's day in and day out work of applying
Mhm,
that framework, that fiduciary framework to every decision you make as a health plan administrator. I do
right.
think the awareness is growing around what it means to be a fiduciary, but unfortunately, I think that it's become not only a marketing ploy, but we're thinking of it only in the context of litigation and how to avoid fiduciary liability. We should
Mhm.
be thinking about being a fiduciary as a way to better serve our plan and our plan members and
Right.
to lower costs and to achieve value. Certainly, we don't want to be on the receiving end of a lawsuit.
Mhm.
We would also like to save a few $100 million and
Sure.
or a couple million depending on your plan size. But if
Yeah.
you do those things as a fiduciary, you will put yourself in a winning position, I think.
Yeah. And of course, it's not an excuse to say, well, my broker told me so. The consultant said, the insurance company said, that's not
Right.
an excuse for, yeah, because
No.
they don't have the fiduciary duty.
Right. Yeah, and knowing that and, when you ask questions, because you have to ask the questions. I mean, that's like,
Mhm.
step number 1. You can't
Right.
disclose compensation if you don't ask. And then document that you've asked, right? Because even if you're met with pushback or met, for if you ask for data and the carrier says no for these 5 reasons, and you tell them
Mhm.
why those reasons are wrong and they continue to fight you, maybe you lose that battle, but you've now documented a fiduciary process that at least protects you from fiduciary liability. So documenting those things is really important.
Right. Absolutely. Hugely important. Chris, do you see litigation, legislation, or market disruption as the path forward? Which, one do you think is going to start changing things?
Well, if I had a magic wand, I would, have them all collide together at the same
Mhm.
time. And that might actually happen. We do have a really big piece of promising legislation at the federal level right now. It's the Marshall-Hickenlooper
Mhm.
bill, Patients Deserve Price Tags Act. And
Mm.
it's not just about hospital price transparency and PBM transparency. Section 7 in that bill actually is a great tool for employers. It's all about, codifying access to data, codifying the
Mhm.
standards that the data has to be delivered in, the frequency in which it has to be delivered. So it could be game changing. So that's on the federal level. We do have some really promising moves in the courts. We've had a
Mhm.
couple cases now move beyond the dismissal stage and are moving to discovery,
Okay.
which is really important. Which essentially it just shows that these companies can be held liable for some of the games that they're playing. There's a couple other cases on the horizon, no pun intended, um, that we should, in the private sector and public sector, I think we should be looking out for. And then just market disruption. I think market disruption will be catalyzed by some of those
Mhm.
things.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're working on the payment side with a tool that is going to help that part. And I spoke to David Schenker a few episodes ago about the waste just in the payment system. Now, the price
Hmm.
tags that you were just talking about, I'm not sure if you've ever heard of State Senator Mike Monroney.
Hmm.
In 1955, he was in Oklahoma at the time, and he passed legislation. Before his legislation, you could literally go from one car dealer to another, find the exact car for huge differences. And to this day, the stickers, the MSRP stickers that you see on cars, those are called by car dealers Monroney stickers because he said, every dealer, his legislation drove that. So, and I've often been saying healthcare, we need Monroney stickers in healthcare. And that's exactly what you're talking about in this legislation.
Yeah, I'll have to
Okay.
remember that. That's a great analogy.
Yeah. Yeah. Mike Monroney, Oklahoma, 1955 is when he passed that. So I actually wrote about it in my book, which I'll send you a copy of, Rigged: How Insurance Ruined Healthcare. So, Chris, what can plan sponsors do today to push back against the healthcare heist?
Number 1, get educated, get up to speed on these games. Don't fall prey to I'll call it the sort of the congressman fallacy, which is that believing everybody else's congressman is corrupt except your own.
Mm.
Or, believing everybody's broker consultant is bad except your own. You have to be willing to question everybody. And then I would say a practical, you need to learn from your peers,
Mhm.
engage in peer learning. There is an incredible strength from the community of self funded employers and employers. And if you engage in collective action, I've seen that work. I've seen employers in Texas recently band together when they were delivered a plan amendment that they were asked to sign by
Mhm.
HCSC. They banded together and they collectively responded with an adamant no. And it was
Wow.
successful, right?
Mhm.
So the industry would prefer that you be kept in silos and not sort
Mhm.
of put all the pieces together. So I think that's an important
Yeah, absolutely. So, Chris, my final question is if every HR director and benefits consultant slash broker read this book, what's the one thing that you hope they would take away from it?
I would hope that they would walk through the world and certainly walk through their jobs with a completely new lens, right?
Mhm.
Everything that they're going to see in the HR world, or even as they drive down the street, is going to look different when you know why that freestanding, MRI center just got bought by the hospital, or why your
Mm,
pediatrician's room is now owned by the local system,
mhm.
or why you're seeing, ads about pharma on TV, or why you're reading contracts that seem like they're not in your best interest. I truly hope that for HR leaders and really anybody that reads this, you are unable to look at the world in the same way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a fantastic book. So, um,
Thank you.
Chris, thank you for writing this necessary book. And thanks again for joining me on, another episode. This has been exactly the kind of candid conversation that we need more of in this industry. So your book, The Great American Healthcare Heist, is a must read for anyone that thinks they're making informed decisions on healthcare spending. Before we sign off, if folks want to follow your work, buy your book, or connect with you, where should they start, Chris?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. I write almost daily there, and also if you want to support the book, it's available on Amazon and most major retailers' websites. And
Mhm.
like I said last time, I would encourage you to buy it for your local political leaders or county commissioners
Right.
or even a friend.
Yeah.
The more we know, the better we're all off.
Absolutely. Our guest today, Chris Deacon, who wrote the book, The Great American Healthcare Heist, and it's a must read. I am Ralph Weber, the Benefit Whisperer. If you got something out of today's episode, do me a favor, subscribe. Whether it's to our YouTube channel or our podcast, comment, share it with somebody who could use it. If you've got questions or ideas about future episodes, just, email me, ralph at thebenefitwhisper.com or call 832-924-3330 or visit fixmybenefitsnow.com. Thanks again, Chris, for being here today.
Thanks.